In New York City is former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson, and he was recently selected by the Libertarians at their national convention as their presidential candidate in 2012. Governor Johnson, thanks for being with us. And,
Susan, thank you for having me on this morning.
Knowing that ultimately, of course, you'd like to be in the White House, but it's a long road to go for third-party candidates. What is the ultimate goal of this expensive and time-consuming bid that you've been making in the presidential campaign this year? What do you want to accomplish?
Well, really, I'm talking about the same message as Ron Paul. I think this is the fastest growing segment of American politics today. Libertarianism, whether that's slash libertarian or libertarian leaning. So anyway, it's to continue to talk about a message that that I think really fixes America. I think we're on the verge of a monetary collapse, and it's because we are continuing to spend and borrow 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. So I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. I'm promising to veto any expenses that exceed revenue, and I'm promising to advocate on the part of the fair tax, which is throwing out the entire federal tax system and replacing it with a consumption tax, does away with the IRS, does away with income tax, corporate tax, tax withholding, repeals the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, allowing for an income tax.
Would you talk about the route to a balanced budget? What would you do?
Well, I would submit it. Of course, I can't promise a balanced budget, but I'm going to submit a balanced budget to Congress in the year 2013. That would be a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending, believing that if we don't balance the federal budget, we are going to find ourselves with a collapsed government. I don't think there's any denying the mathematics of continuing to borrow and spend to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar. So much talk is being given of Greece, to Greece of late, the fact that they're 160% of GDP. Look, we're 6 to 8 years away from that. So balancing the federal budget, that would include Medicaid, Medicare, military spending. I would abolish the Federal Department of Education, believing that it's really a negative to take federal funds. The federal government gives each state about 11 cents out of every dollar that every state spends, but it comes with 16 cents worth of strings attached. So what I don't think people recognize is that it's really a negative to take federal money, just give education back to the states, 50 laboratories of innovation and best practice, and I think that's exactly what we would have. Fabulous success that would get emulated, failure because we're so competitive that would get avoided. I don't think people recognize that the Department of Education was established in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. Medicaid, Medicare, I would do the same thing with regard to Medicaid and Medicare, health care for the poor, health care for those over 65. I would block grant the states a fixed amount of money, 43% less than what we're currently spending, and rely on the states to come up with best practices that I think would show some fabulous success. Of course, there would be failure that would get avoided, but Washington top-down, Washington knows best. That's what has us in the predicament that we're in right now. As governor of New Mexico, I did reform Medicaid in the state of New Mexico. We changed it from a fee-for-service model to a managed care model, saved hundreds of millions of dollars, set up better health care networks. At that time, I believe that if the federal government would have block granted the state of New Mexico 43% less money, done away with all the strings and the mandates associated with how to deliver health care to the poor, that I could have effectively overseen the delivery of health care to the poor. I maintain the same for Medicare, health care for those over 65.
Governor Johnson, let me move from policy to process, and before I do that, invite our viewers. The phone numbers are on the screen right now. We welcome your calls. You can also tweet us at C-SPAN WJ or send us an email. We'll continue to rotate all those addresses on the screen so you can be involved in the process. A viewer is really unhappy with my first question to you and tweeted this. Susan's question about your goals in this campaign is a disgusting show of establishmentarianism. So let me move to process with you, Governor Johnson. Here's history. Past presidential modern times, third-party candidates, John Anderson in 1980, 6.6% of the vote. Ross Perot in 92, the largest vote getter, 18.9%. Ralph Nader in 2000, 2.7%, and none received any electoral votes. So let me ask you about the process by which your campaign will embark from now till November.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be doing this if there wasn't an opportunity to win, and the opportunity to win is to poll at 15% against Obama and Romney, believing Romney will be the nominee and be on the national debate stage with the two of them. If that happens, and this is the pie-in-the-sky scenario, if that happens, I think anything is possible given the fact that 80% of Americans right now are saying they would vote for a third-party candidate. And changing the world a little bit as something less than getting on stage with Obama and Romney and winning would be to, like I say, change the world a little bit. In this case, I think we need to balance the federal budget. I think we need to get out of Afghanistan. We need to end the wars. We need to bring the troops home. I think that we should be adopting marriage equality in this country. I think that we should reform our drug laws. I think there are all sorts of civil liberties out there, civil liberties issues that could be addressed by a libertarian president. I think there's all sorts of dollars and cents issues that could be very effectively dealt with by a libertarian president, as opposed to Republicans, which seem to spend a whole lot of money even though they're not supposed to, and Democrats, which historically are supposed to be good about civil liberties. I don't know if that's been the case of late.
Ballot access in the 50 states is also an important part of this. How will the Libertarian Party approach ballot access issues?
I should be one of 3 candidates on the ballot in all 50 states. Libertarians over their 40-year history have achieved 100% ballot access, meaning all 50 states in 4 of those election cycles. This is a cycle where the Libertarian Party believes that it will be on the ballot in all 50 states. So that's another thing that's very significant, very, very significant.
Last question for me, and then we'll get to our callers. Our lines are ringing a lot here. Your campaign announced that it was accepting federal matching funds, and I wonder how that squares with your libertarian point of view.
Well, it's a system that's been gamed by the 2 old parties, so under the gaming of the system, Democrats and Republicans have received hundreds of millions of dollars. Look, I would be the first one to sign off on no federal matching funds, but in the meantime, this is why we have 2 parties, and that these federal matching funds could conceivably help out in bringing about change.
But couldn't every person looking at federal dollars available for any program say, well, the program exists, so therefore I might as well take advantage of it?
Well, you can certainly argue both sides of it, and I understand the arguments for both sides, but keep in mind, Democrats and Republicans collecting hundreds of millions of dollars, they're the ones that have gamed the system in this way, and they're the ones that benefit, period. So to be the Libertarian candidate and to qualify in the first place and then to take these federal matching funds, really we're talking about maybe not even a penny relative to the dollars that are being given to the Democrats and the Republicans.
Let's go to calls for Governor Johnson, beginning with Evergreen Park, Illinois. Rose is a Democrat there. Good morning, Rose.
Good morning, and thank you, C-SPAN. Susan, always. I just have a couple of things. First, with the policy versus process. The budget, when Gary Johnson says that he would submit a budget, well, then what? So we saw in the first, when Senator Kirk came in on the latter portion of originally Senator Barack, now President's term, he came in, the Democrats had put together a budget, and Senator Kirk came in with John McCain on the floor and said, stop stopped the budget from moving, and then said to Senator McCain, "We won." Well, what did we win? Other than the fact that you can say that there's no budget, no budget, no budget. Big deal. One other thing. How do you feel about giving our land to Canada and one industry, big oil, and then please tell America how many foreign trade zones exist in our country and what do they exist for?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Johnson?
You know, I apologize that I'm getting a little bit poor feed. I'm not picking up everything that is being said.
Okay.
So,
One was the last question was on the oil trades. The foreign trade zones and what Americans get for those. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I'm having a really hard time hearing. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's our fault. Our technicians will work on that. And as we do that, why don't we listen to another telephone call from Silver Spring, Maryland, and I'll keep tabs here. Sam is an independent. Go ahead, Sam.
Job, as always. And also C-SPAN showed the convention, their convention over the weekend, and the debate he had, and it was excellent. Thank you. Keep up the good work. I want to find out, I think he said then about he has to get 15%. Do they plan on having a petition? I'd like to see the Libertarian Party and other groups represented in the national debate, not just the two main parties. On his platform, does he plan on doing town hall meetings or what are coming to big cities? And thank you very much and keep up the good work. Okay,
thanks very much. I'm going to keep tally of your questions here for just a couple while our technicians work on the governor's audio. I will take a couple more calls and then we'll go back and check how he's doing. Let's hear from Oakland, California. Next up is Jane, Republican. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I would like to know how could the Libertarian Party present a budget to the Senate or the Congress when they're mostly Republicans or Democrats and there's no Libertarians that's in the House to do any kind of work for the people if he became president?
All right, thanks.
How would he address that?
All right, thank you very much. Governor Johnson, have we reconnected?
Yes, and I can hear just fine. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So you heard that last caller, and then I'll fill you in on the one you missed.
Well, so talking about a balanced budget, I'm promising to submit a balanced budget to Congress. Now, that's not promising a balanced budget because Congress is going to have to balance that budget. But I will just suggest to you that I would have been elected President of the United States promising to do this. So I'm going to suggest that the wind would be at my back and there would be a lot of pressure on reducing spending. I don't think that Congress can balance a budget. I don't think it's possible. I'm promising to veto legislation where expenses exceed revenue. I'll also add that as governor of New Mexico, I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined. So I have no aversion to vetoing legislation. I'm just going to argue that by promising to submit a balanced budget, presenting a document with a $1.4 trillion reduction in federal spending, taking on the debate and the discussion that will go along with this document, and then vetoing legislation where expenses exceed revenue, I'm going to just offer up that spending will be lower with those two promises kept than any other possible scenario that you could come up with. And I think it's important to reduce our spending given the fact that we're not immune from the mathematics of continuing to borrow and spend 43 cents out of every dollar that we are spending.
Governor Johnson referenced Ron Paul and Libertarian GOP at the beginning of the program. Let me just look at a very quick Ron Paul story from the Washington Post in here. Paul tries unorthodox tactic to gain leverage at GOP convention. And this is adding more delegates to the national convention because his supporters have flooded the party's snoozy state conventions and then elected themselves to delegate slots. That prompts a question now transfixing the GOP. What does Paul want? With these numbers, the perennial outsider could gain enough leverage to demand a speaking slot or changes to the party platform at the convention. If GOP bosses fear that Paul's unhappy fans could disrupt their big moment, here's this quote: "It's already too late to stop Ron Paul's strategy from working. We have a ton of people on the floor at the Republican National Convention." Governor Johnson, do you have any comments on that, by the way?
Well, no, just that I think for the most part I'm delivering the same message as that of Ron Paul. I don't think he's going to be successful in getting the nomination for president. So what happens to the message? What happens to the voice when that goes away? I'm just going to pose that there is a viable alternative and that it's not a compromise alternative, and that would be me running as the Libertarian candidate for president.
The caller that you missed while we were connecting your audio asked about that 15% threshold, and that's what the National Debate Commission uses for multiple national polls in order to get a slot at the debates. And the caller asked whether or not you were going to conduct a national petition to get access to the debates.
Well, I don't think that you can sweep 15% polling underneath the rug, that will be noticed. Right now in PPP polling, I'm polling around 8% against Obama and Romney. I don't know if it's my name. Well, let me just say, I think it's more significant that I'm the third name as opposed to Gary Johnson. I don't think 80% of the people in this country know who I am or what I'm about, but I will say that if you present a third name to a voter in this country these days, a lot of them are going to say yes, this person, as opposed to what we know. What we know is not going to change things. I mean, I just think there's a tremendous discontent right now with politics, reflected in the fact that 80% of Americans are saying they would consider voting for a third-party candidate. That's unprecedented.
Well, to that end, on Twitter, Noopy32TLS writes, third party is necessary now. Why does the Libertarian Party insist on not organizing and running candidates from the bottom up? Now is ideal.
Well, I think the Libertarian Party is absolutely committed to running candidates from the bottom up and have been. Perhaps they've, well, politics. Top of the ticket helps the bottom of the ticket. Bottom of the ticket helps the top of the ticket. I would just say that Libertarians are running candidates top to bottom. They have for 40 years. They really haven't gotten anybody elected. Hopefully that changes. And with just a broad brushstroke, if I may, just describing a libertarian, I think most people in this country are fiscally responsible and socially tolerant. And I think with a broad brushstroke, that's where a libertarian lies. I think that libertarians are really strong on civil liberties. I think libertarians are really strong when it comes to dollars and cents, basically managing the checkbook, lower taxes. So I think that you take the best of what Republicans are supposed to be about, and you take the best of what Democrats are supposed to be about, and you end up with a libertarian. Now, of course, that's my argument, and we'll see how it ends up flying.
Pelkey, Michigan. Dave is an independent there for Governor Johnson. Go ahead.
Good morning. Sir, I'd like to bring up something to you that happened back when Ronald Reagan was running, I believe, the first term, and it really threw me for a loop. It was Lyndon LaRouche. Do you remember him? and anyway, he wanted people to vote for him. He's saying, vote for me, but if you don't, please vote for Reagan. Well, that kind of threw me for a loop, and it made me lose kind of respect for the Libertarian Party at that time. With all that being said, I truly feel we need a third party in this country, and I don't think a Libertarian by itself is going to do it. I don't think the Green Party is going to do it, the Workers' Party, on and on and on. But if all these grassroots parties could form and make one super third party, get the best ideas out of each one, your thoughts on that, sir?
Pardon me?
If all the parties could join together and make a third party, that was his suggestion, there would be enough groundswell, enough critical mass.
Yeah, no, it sounds great in theory. I just think the reality of it is impossible. And Libertarian Party, been around for 40 years, you know, going back 40 years. Whoa, that was the kooky party that talked about legalizing drugs. You know, right now in America, 50% of Americans are supporting legalizing marijuana. Who's ultimately responsible for that shift in public opinion? I think it might be the Libertarian Party. And by the way, why is it that 50% of Americans are supporting legalizing marijuana today as opposed to 40 years ago? Well, I think it's because more and more people are talking about the issue. And the more people talk about the issue, the better it does, because the more informed people are, the more people recognize that there are very viable alternatives to what we're currently doing, and it doesn't involve arresting and incarcerating the whole country.
This is from Twitter. Gary Johnson said over the weekend, and I'm sure this is in our convention coverage, that there were no threats to the United States. Then the next day, the underwear bombing story broke. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, there are no military threats, to my knowledge, from any country in the world against the United States. Now, the United States, the President of the United States should be vigilant to any of those threats. I think that's probably a primary responsibility of the President of the United States, is to make sure that we are not being threatened from any foreign country. That said, are there military threats from foreign countries currently? If we want to use Iran as an example, look, Iran is an unintended consequence of us taking out Iraq. That was their only concern, but we take out Iraq, we take out Saddam Hussein, now they're raising their head. Do they have nuclear capability? No. Should we be vigilant to that nuclear capability being developed and potentially being used against the United States? Absolutely yes. But I think if we bomb Iran tomorrow, we're going to find ourselves with 100 million enemies that we didn't otherwise have, and that we're going to be engaged in a 2-year bombing maintenance program. Libertarian Party, I am a non-interventionist. Let's not use American military power unless we're attacked. And in the context of being attacked, President of the United States, best intelligence available to determine whether attack is imminent, which I would also say is attack. I was against Iraq from the very beginning. I know there was talk of weapons of mass destruction, but at that time I said, look, don't we have the military surveillance capability to see Iraq roll out any weapons of mass destruction? And if they do it, we can go in and deal with it. I thought if we went into Iraq, we were going to find ourselves in a civil war to which there would be no end. I think that has happened. Afghanistan, we were attacked by al-Qaeda. We attacked al-Qaeda back. Completely warranted. I think after having been in Afghanistan for 2 months, we wiped out al-Qaeda. Let's err to 6 months. After 6 months, we wiped out al-Qaeda. We should have gotten out of Afghanistan 11 years ago. Look, the underwear bomber, these things happen. We should be vigilant. Is this a threat against the government of the United States of America? No, I don't think it is. Should we be vigilant to these kinds of attacks? Absolutely. This is where our resources ought to go, and we ought to do our utmost to prevent these kinds of things from happening. But I think all of us would recognize that these things are going to happen. This is what's going to be occurring, hopefully with minor consequence.
Just a clarifying question. A publication called The DC suggests that you say that you support America's military effort to aid, America's efforts to aid African troops in tracking down the Lord's Resistance Army leader Joseph Kony in Uganda. Is that true?
Well, so in the context of being non-interventionist, let's not use our military power unless we are attacked or imminent attack. In that context, do any of us in this country want to stand by and watch a Holocaust occur? No, I don't think any of us want to see that happen. So in the case of Joseph Kony, in the case of the Lord's Resistance Army, first off, President of the United States and I, as President of the United States, would have a constitutional obligation to take any plans I had to use the military to Congress, get congressional approval to go to war. So in this case, the Lord's Resistance Army, I have come to find out that this may be the worst terrorist group that the world has seen over the last 20 years, that it's a finite number, about 300 in the Lord's Resistance Army, that they've been marauding 3 African countries. It's not getting involved in a specific country. The 3 countries asked for U.S. intervention. Congress authorized that intervention. The President signed off on that intervention. I think the difference is that I would have asked for volunteers to go in and deal with this situation. The President has sent in advisors, but arguably this is a group that has been responsible for tens of thousands of rapes, murders, and mutilations over the last 20 years.
Next is a call from Syracuse, New York. Nick, Democrat. Good morning, Nick.
Hi, morning. I just wanted to ask what they got to do about Social Security.
Your Social Security policy.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of living is going up sky high, and they give us a $10, $15 raise, and, forget about it.
Thanks, Nick. Governor Johnson.
The
Social Security costs?
And I heard that question, but my hearing is not very good again.
I'm so sorry. We're having problems.
Social Security is what I heard. What about Social Security?
What would you do about it?
Social Security. Pardon me?
His question was, he only gets a $15 a month raise. His costs are going up. What would you do about Social Security for seniors?
Well, first of all, Social Security is very, very fixable. Social Security is a system that very simply needs to take in more money than what it pays out. Of course, it has paid in $3.5 trillion more than what it has paid out, but the government has spent that money, so it's gone. But to reform Social Security, very simply, change the escalator that's built into Social Security from the wage index to the inflation rate. Come up with a means testing that could be very fair, raise the retirement age, and I think there should be provision for opt-in, opt-out. I am proposing the fair tax. I am proposing to throw out the entire federal tax system and replace it with a national consumption tax, in this case specifically talking about the fair tax. But there would be no withholdings anymore from your payroll check. You would not have to match Social Security, nor would your employer have to match Social Security. That would come out of the proceeds of the fair tax. But Social Security as an issue and as a program, very savable. And I say this relative to Medicare. Medicare is really the 800-pound gorilla that has this country in this state of affairs that it is in, which I'm going to suggest that if we don't fix it, we're going to find ourselves without a country, and we're going to find ourselves without any Social Security. We're going to find ourselves without any health care. Getting back to Medicare, for anybody that's going to fall off their chair because of a 43% reduction in Medicare, the alternative is no health care at all. The alternative is a collapsed government unable to deliver any goods and services.
Governor Johnson, on Twitter, Chris Jones writes to you, during a recession, consumption tax inhibits recovery by discouraging consumption.
I think that, first of all, I think that the fair tax, one federal consumption tax, number one, ends up to be cost neutral over a very short amount of time. So the can of Coke that's currently selling for $1 has 23% embedded tax in it. You take away that embedded tax, you take away that tax that you can't see, and you change it over to a very transparent 23%, what you end up having is Coca-Cola, which does not have to sell the can of Coke for $1 anymore to make the same profit. They can sell it for 80 cents. You're doing away with all those hidden taxes. They're going away. So Coke sells the can of Coke for 80 cents, applies the 23% fair tax to it. It ends up costing the same amount of money. It's really the answer when it comes to exports, making our exports 23% more competitive. It's the answer when it comes to China. And it's really the answer when it comes to jobs, because in a zero corporate tax rate environment, if the private sector doesn't create tens of millions of jobs, I don't know what it will take for the private sector to create tens of millions of jobs. The fair tax, so also a consumption tax by its nature is regressive. The fair tax deals with that regressive nature, meaning the less money you make, you're going to have to buy a certain amount of goods and services to get by on. The fair tax deals with the regressive nature of a consumption tax by giving everyone in the country a prebate check of $200 a month. So all of us would receive $2,400 a year from the government that would allow all of us to pay the fair tax up to the point of the poverty level. This is how the fair tax addresses the regressiveness of a consumption tax. I am specifically supporting the fair tax. Check it out, fairtax.org. I think that it really would improve what we are currently encountering. Doing away with the IRS and the weeks of preparation that all of us spend in dealing with the IRS, I think the positives way outweigh not giving it a try.
We have about 10 minutes left with Governor Gary Johnson, Libertarian candidate for president. Lafayette, Indiana, up next. Terry, a Republican.
Hello, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Terry, go ahead. We can hear
you.
I'm glad that you got the nomination. I'm very happy about it. I wish you the best of luck. And I listened to people talking about Ron Paul and then knocking him down about legalizing drugs, but they don't say that it would cut the murder rate in half in this country, cut our taxes by over $400 billion a year, and it would stop all the drug gangs in the country. And it's just ridiculous the way it is now. My son got his jaw broken by a gang member and wouldn't tell on him for fear of what would happen to him or his family or our properties.
Okay, Terry, thanks so much. Governor, I can tell that you're still having audio problems. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and I think we actually got it fixed. We put it on speaker here, and I apologize. I virtually did not hear anything that, other than that we are engaged in a fruitless drug war, and I would certainly agree with that.
Yeah,
but maybe we have the sound cured here.
All right, so his point in particular, maybe you can speak to it, was that the legalizing drugs would have a very positive effect on the murder rate in the United States.
Well, I believe that. I mean, if we just look at border violence with Mexico, 40,000 deaths south of the border over the last 4 years. This is a prohibition phenomenon. These are disputes that are being played out with guns rather than the courts. Legalized marijuana. Arguably 75% of that border violence with Mexico goes away as a result of legalizing marijuana, that being the estimate of the drug cartel's activities, 75% that are engaged in the marijuana trade.
Next call comes from Romulus, Michigan, outside Detroit. Jamie is a Democrat. Go ahead, Jamie. You're on.
Hey, how you doing? Good morning, C-SPAN and Mr. Johnson. I was calling because I have a problem with the Child Protective Services system right now. I was wondering why in Michigan that they targeted the lower income family, and there really isn't any fairness in the court system. How can Mr. Johnson help with that?
You know, Jamie, I don't have the answer as to in this particular if this is a state's if the state is utilizing some discretion in how these funds are being distributed. But I get back to the model that I think that we're going to have to fix Medicaid and Medicare, virtually all existing federal program, and that is going to be to devolve these programs down to the states. What I'm hearing you say is that the state of Michigan has some real issues with child protective services, and I can't speak to those specifically. I will just say, though, that back to the competitive nature of all the states, that if states implement child protective services practices that really are cost-effective and everybody's happy, those are going to be practices that get emulated by the other states. Sounds like Michigan may have issues with its child protective services that other states would do well to avoid.
Next is Kissimmee, Florida. Julio, Republican.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, my question kind of links both of your guests, the one you had before as well with this one. What do you think of obesity in this country, and what do you think is a good route for the problem to be solved?
Well, I think it's about education. You know, I like the notion that that I can read calories on the menu and be able to determine how many calories I'm consuming. I think that goes a long way toward obesity. That you link up, holy cow, a Big Mac, fries, and a shake is my daily allotment of calories, and shouldn't I be exercising some? So I think education is the main component. I just think that if government starts mandating, starts passing laws relative to calories and health, that what you're going to end up seeing is you're going to end up seeing huge bureaucracies that don't end up making a difference. I was on a talk show the other day advocating that, look, I think government should pass laws requiring restaurants to list their calories. Well, I was thinking of that law in terms of the Gary Johnson law, where the restaurant owner would be able to sit down and in an afternoon with a $12 calorie counting book could reasonably come to some pretty good estimates on what the calorie content was of meals. Well, that would have been the Gary Johnson law, and I think it would have made a huge difference, would not have imposed on business, and would have provided really valuable educational tools to consumers. But then I realized that at a point I would leave office, and because that program would have been so successful, that now there would be new legislation that would require stiffening of calorie counting criteria, that it was going to have to be very accurate, that it was going to have to reflect proteins, carbohydrates, fats in the most accurate way. Point being is that ultimately my calorie counting legislation would lead to the biggest bureaucracy in the federal government. That's what happens. So no, I don't want to propose legislation from government to address obesity, but education is obviously the key.
So just to understand then, the complex food analysis that is required, government regulation on all foods sold in grocery stores, you disagree with that?
No, I do agree with that. I think that is a given, and that it back to education. It's really key to understanding half of the obesity problem, which is your intake. The other half, I think, has to do with exercise.
So that's a good use of government mandates and regulation.
I do believe that, yes.
Next telephone call, Vallejo, California. Lori, Democrat.
Yes, hi. I was wondering, two quick questions. One, are you for or against gay marriage? And two, if you're president, would you do anything about the non-treatment or under-treatment of the mentally ill?
Well, first of all, yes, I do support marriage equality, and I know that that's been in the news here the last couple of days. I think that President Obama's position effectively doesn't change marriage equality in this country by leaving it up to the states. I think it is a constitutionally guaranteed right, and that the federal government should be dealing with that. So that's marriage equality. Talking about the mentally ill, I come back to what we're going to have to devolve to in this country regarding health care, in my opinion, to make it work, and that is going to be devolving health care to the states, not mandated from the federal government. That has us in the predicament that we're in, which is we're borrowing and printing money to the tune of 43 cents out of every dollar that we're spending. If we don't fix our spending, we're going to find ourselves without any health care at all from the government, and for that matter, we're not going to be able to garner health care for ourselves with a collapsed U.S. dollar, a collapsed government, which will be the result of continuing to borrow and spend what we're doing.
Last call for Governor Johnson is from Roseau, Minnesota. Clifford, Republican there. You're on, Clifford.
Good morning. You know, one thing I want to find out, and I've never heard mention of, is fair tax, is that people that are retired and spending their savings will have to pay tax on their money the second time. I never hear that mentioned in the discussions of fair tax. Thank you.
Well, first off, retired, you're still going to have to file with the IRS, so that goes away. For those that are on deferred retirement, meaning having saved money and with it later going to be subject to tax, of course, that would go away. There also is the notion that this is cost neutral over a very short amount of time. So it's not that you're going to be having to spend more money on these items. So I think when you add all this up, that it gets back to the notion of fair, that this is a fair way of rebooting the American economy, if you will, and going forward, that we really will benefit from the added jobs that will get added with no corporate income tax, and that our exports become 23% more competitive. So I don't know if it's as big an issue as some would say. It only applies to new goods and services. It's not a compounded tax. So for the home builder that's building a home, everything would be tax exempt up to the point of sale. And that would also apply to businesses. Any goods or service used in the final production of a good is not going to be taxed in this. So I think we'll find the opposite occur, that this really will stimulate the U.S. economy.
Governor Johnson is on Twitter. You can follow him at Governor Gary Johnson, and there is a much fuller discussion of his campaign for president and his principles on the website, GaryJohnson2012.com. Governor Johnson, thanks so much for being on C-SPAN this morning and taking our viewers' questions. We appreciate it.
Well, great being on, and I'm glad. I wish the sound would have been that way the whole time, but anyway, it worked out fine. Thank you very much.
I'm so sorry. I'm glad we got it fixed for you. Please come back.